To exemplify just how short 100 years really is, I'd like to recognize our most honored guest, Ruth Doolittle. Ruth, may I tell anybody or everybody how old you are? 98. Ruth is 98 years old. She lives in Virginia, and she lived in the park residence starting in 1914. The same residence that these other 7 families lived in. I lived in that residence for 23 years. Ruth, I'm sure you could tell an awful lot of stories. And thank you for being here. "100 years. It's not that much time, is it? It really flew by, didn't it, Ruth? But even though 100 years was only yesterday, it was indeed a very different world in 1909. In 1909, about 35 families lived in the park at the time. Most of them spoke Norwegian. The forest we see today was largely cut over. Captain Duclan was the keeper of the Eagle Bluff Lighthouse with his wife and 7 sons. Miss Weberg lived in the park and taught at the schoolhouse number 3, located along Shore Road near Tennyson Bay. And William Howard Taft was president. And Fighting Bob La Follette was one of our U.S. senators. And most notably, wireless internet was not yet available at the Nicolet Bay Camp store. As many of you know, Interstate Park was the first state park established in 1900. Interstate Park, however, was not part of an established state park system, and that's one of the reasons we're here today. In 1908, recognizing the increasing population of Wisconsin, I believe it was around 1.5 million at the time, and noting the devastation to the state's forests by the logging boom of the 19th century, the state legislature wisely enlisted the input of famed landscape architect John Nolan to study the feasibility of a state park system for Wisconsin. And he traveled all over the state looking for hidden gems. And he came up with lots of recommendations, but those recommendations focused on 4 different areas. These areas included an area where the Wisconsin and the Mississippi River meet, later to be called Wyalusing State Park. That's where I had my first job with the department. Then he recommended an ancient former gorge of the Wisconsin River north of Madison, known as Devil's Lake State Park. He also made a recommendation for a scenic area known as the Dells of the Wisconsin River. And you know what happened there. And he recommended a 4,000-acre peninsula located on a peninsula. At the time it was called Eagles Bluff, later to be known as Peninsula State Park. Peninsula was notably the first to be formally established in 1909 and became the first state park established as part of a state park system that has over 98 properties today. As Ron has said and others, every state park is special. We're part of a state park system. Fortunately, we can make a lot of money to support a state park system, and that's a good thing. Each state park has statewide, natural, scenic, historical significance. They're all places of profound beauty and recreational potential. And today, we're here to celebrate the legacy of an era when people had such amazing foresight to preserve natural places for a world that they could never have possibly imagined. Where people can refresh their spirit, where they can refresh their bodies and minds, where urban stresses can be left behind. As I said, the population in 1909 was 1.5 million. Now it's somewhere, I'm not even sure, 5 or 6 million. In these short years, these short 100 years have been just a mere lifetime for some of us, where we've weathered 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and more social upheaval and technological changes than could ever have been imagined. But this park is still here, healthy and vital as ever, providing a higher quality of life, economic impact on the local community, and a magnet for people from all over the United States. The park remains a source of memories for millions. It remains a source of stability and predictability, a place you can always count on, despite extensive development, population growth, both statewide and the country. And the good thing is, we're talking optimism here. As the citizens of Wisconsin continue to support purchases of land for parks, for forests and wildlife areas, we should keep in mind the 100-year story of Peninsula and what it means to millions of citizens for Door County community, and how short 100 years really is. I'd like to end this talk by reading an excerpt from the introduction of Norm's book. His book is called The Park, capital letters, The Park. Old winds are about tonight, old steps up the street. It's not long a human lives, but the place underneath, through all those changes made. Warren Nelson wrote this line in a song called Old Winds. Whenever I walk the path between Nicolay Boat Launch and the beach, Norm says, I remember this line from Old Winds. Norm in his book says, if I could be anywhere in the park, where would I be? On top of Eagle Tower? On Sven's Bluff at sunset? Somewhere on Eagle Trail? In campsite 636? It's a tough decision, but my first choice would be that small section of path along Nicolay Bay. The place underneath stays through all those changes made. Remember this, all of you, this is only the beginning. Thanks.